as needed, but definitely want to respect the virtual meeting protocol we got at the city. So I know Carol is here, vice chair, so she can call the meeting to order.
Did Bobby say he was going to be late, or?
I have not heard anything
Okay.
from him.
All right, so I can go ahead and call the meeting to order, and then hopefully he will jump on.
Okay.
Kevin, do you want to do a roll call?
Yep. Don Cooney.
Present.
Ben Dameron.
Here.
Patrice Griffin.
Here in Kalamazoo.
Kim Hollers.
Present.
Brenda Hughes. Sakia Lee. Shalana Lewis. Carol McGlynn.
Here.
Jonathan Pulley. I thought I saw him. Oh, he's here.
Here.
All right. And Alyssa Stewart.
Present.
All right.
Okay. Then we will move on to the approval of the regular minutes. Are there any changes, corrections? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. This is Brenda.
And second?
I can second. Alyssa Stewart.
Alyssa, thanks, Brenda. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Then we'll just do an all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No change, just to the agenda. Are there any reports from committees, Kevin?
No.
Okay, then we will move on to new business. And the first piece is the SBK funding review.
All right. So everybody got materials for the day related to this particular item. Hope everybody got a chance to review, read, process. The subcommittee, this is a recommendation of the subcommittee. And so, somebody will have to put a motion on the table to accept. We can have discussion. We'll also like to highlight something before we do that, though. There are two members that have conflicts of interest as it relates to this. And so we'll have to make some adjustments in regards to the voting. So I know Kim Hollers is one, has a conflict of interest. Alyssa Stewart also in relation to two of the applicants. And so the idea is to remove those two particular organizations. It'd be Kalamazoo Literacy Council and KRESA, and vote on those separate, as opposed to the one total, all the organizations at once, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Okay.
that makes sense. Then I think we just need a motion to pull those two off. I don't know, do we need to make that a motion, or do we just, I don't know the technical rules there. But anyways, should we, let's make a motion to approve or, to move these forwards, taking the two out for now, and then we'll vote on them separate. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes. So move.
Second?
Support.
Okay, so now discussion.
I got a question.
Yeah, so are we going to have just an overall, is somebody going to present each one so that we can have I know that this is a subcommittee, but I think it's important for us to hear about each one synopsis, and I don't know if that's for somebody from the subcommittee.
Okay. Hold on a minute. Yeah, I could probably do that. Let me get the let me pull it up.
This is Vice Mayor Griffin. While you're looking that up, Kevin, I just have a request for tech support. If you could fix the spelling of my first name, I wasn't able to do that, and it's just spelled incorrectly. Thank you.
Okay. So the motion has been made. Are we at the discussion phase?
Yes.
Okay. And it's a request to have just a synopsis of all of the organizations that apply, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So first one was Kalamazoo County Ready Force. Their project program is basically around increasing the number of 3-year-olds to provide tuition assistance in Edison and Eastside neighborhoods. And they have a pilot element that seeks to increase supports offered to families of those young learners via a family advocate who would be on site at the preschools and would directly build relationships with the families, meeting quarterly with the families and supporting individual needs of the learner and the family to prepare transition to kindergarten, engage in adult-child engagement activities, and support personal and professional career goals of the families involved. The next one was Kalamazoo Literacy Council, and they have a project, Parents Literacy Together, a multi-generational approach to learning, a program that seeks to strengthen and expand multi-generational learning activities in the Edison neighborhood through a jointly led Parent Literacy Together program. This is in partnership with the Goodwill organization. And they also want to use this to connect parents who are enrolled in adult education services to existing family literacy and child literacy programs to prepare them to be more confident first teachers of their children. Next one is Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, Pathway Home Partnership is the name of their program. It's a housing program that will engage particularly in removing barriers, providing financial capabilities and coaching, home buyer education, credit home ownership coaching and assistance, and down payment assistance, and a savings program for their participants, a match savings program. This is a partnership between KNHS and Open Doors. Next one is KRISA. It's My City 2Gen. So My City program is already a summer youth employment program that KRISA runs. And this My City 2Gen in particular builds upon that already established summer program. Will focus on financial literacy, trauma resilience, protective factors, strengths-based goal setting, and healthy living. The pilot element to this My City program will consist of connecting with adults of the youth participants that are served in that program, looking at small cohorts of approximately 10 participants, 10 adult participants who will be connected to various resources in the community. The next one is Northside Association for Community Development, NACD. And this is the residents implementing our plan collaborative. This is a project looking to provide neighborhood-based training around health, construction, and technology, and focusing on the entire family. Next one is Parents for Transition. Their project is Dismantling Generational Curses. This is a series of workshops for parents together with their youth, particularly focused on youth aged 13 to 22 with invisible disabilities to help parents and youth learn how to develop realistic goals for high school graduation, how to disclose disability at an appropriate time, increasing the parents and youth ability to advocate for the youth with the invisible disability, and focusing on how to navigate and cope with the struggles of having an invisible disability. Next one is Rooted, which is focusing on BIPOC centered healing, family empowerment, racial healing, socio-emotional learning, and Black and Brown Therapy Collective activities. The last one is the YWCA. This is an early childhood business incubation project looking to focus work on the Northside community, which is designated as a Best Baby Zone. Best Baby Zone is a national model which focuses on community-driven initiatives and addressing risk and protective factors in the community to improve birth and health outcomes for children in that zone. So they're looking to particularly develop early education business incubation program designed to meet the needs of Northside residents. They'll be working with another program in the Edison neighborhood that's already launched something like this, and looking to develop a unique pathway to entrepreneurship within the early childhood field. And those are high-level overviews of all of the applicants.
Thank you. And so Bobby has joined and Shalana's joined too. So let's add them to the roll call, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Bobby.
You're on mute, Bobby.
What item are we on? I'm not really.
Yeah, I was just about to catch Bobby and Shalana up. We're on the first agenda item, and we had some conflicts of interest. Kim Hollers and Alyssa Stewart, in particular, of two applicants, Kay Risa and Kalamazoo Literacy Council. So there's a motion and a vote made to remove those two and set them aside. We could vote separately on those, but I gave a synopsis of all the applicants, high-level overview of what was proposed. And that's where we're at now in discussion phase.
So we're on 6A, new business. Is that where we are?
Correct.
Okay. You said one, so I'm like, we're doing roll call? Okay. Are there questions for Kevin?
I do have one question. It's Alyssa Stewart. I just wanted to verify, I know we did an LOI process and sort of a collaborative process with grantees, but I wanted to just verify, was there anyone who submitted an LOI who was not brought forward for recommendation? So is there anyone who sought funding who the committee did not move forward to this body?
Yes, there were 15 total, I think. And so it was whittled down to 8. So yes, that did happen.
Could you provide just a high level overview of the overall reasons for why people might have been excluded from consideration?
So could I, and you guys will have to help me, Shalana and Lisa. So I'm not sure if your organizations usually do that, generally tell everybody, other than telling the individual applicant that they didn't get funded. Being that we're a public body, I don't know if we want to dive into why someone didn't get, but I'm not sure I'm just trying to think through this.
No, Yeah, I definitely am sensitive to that, which is why I was just wondering what the characteristics of those applications are. Not for anyone to be named, but just
okay.
overall, what would the reasons be that applications would be brought forward?
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
so in terms of the LOI phase in particular, because that was the process, the LOI, and then moving to the application phase of being invited to submit a full application. Some of the reasons folks did not move forward in the LOI, one, some requested support around like hard physical construction type of activities, like building acquisition. That's not what SBK is involved in currently. Some just didn't provide enough information. And those are the main two that came across that come to mind.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Bobby is muted if you're saying something.
Other questions for Kevin?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. Should I do that now or wait?
No, so is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah,
There's a motion and support. Yeah, we're in discussion phase, Commish, so go ahead.
okay. So here's my issue. I think these are great projects and they're terrific people working on them. And they're needed in the community. My question is, do they fit into an overall strategy? And maybe Alyssa's going to speak to this in her proposal. I mean, do we have a comprehensive plan which says, here's the way we're going to move forward to reduce poverty in the city? A plan that's a collective response, assets-based, data-driven, best practices. Do we have something like that instead of just individual great things that we're doing? So much energy, so much effort. That's my question.
So I think you could answer that as well as anybody because you've been part of it. So I mean, do we have an overall plan? We have a plan currently, the SBK plan that you were part of from 2018. The overall piece I would say is around this two generation lens and this two generation approach that we are trying to build out. So I think that's where the comprehensiveness comes in. And all of these items have two generation components as I provided to you all in the materials. And so I think that's where we're starting at.
Yeah. And I think that's right, Kev. Maybe I'm asking for too much, but we got so much in the city that's really working on these different things. I wish we could bring it all together into some kind of a collective response. I guess that's what I'm looking for. And maybe that's too much.
Well, it's not too much. I would say above all, this is always a learning endeavor. And so, I definitely welcome any type of input or contribution you have in terms of how you see we can achieve that. If you don't think if you don't think we're doing that now, we always want to improve. So I think we made some improvements since we started this thing, and we could always do better. So love to talk to you all offline about, what are you thinking needs to be added to get us to what you're thinking about?
That sounds great. I'll follow up with that, Kev.
Kevin, Carol, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wondered, so are we funding the applications that have been moved forward? Is that their total ask for
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes. For their applications, or partially funding?
Yes, it was some of them they are funded at different amounts. The recommendations are at different amounts. Some at 100%, some partial. We did not have enough to fully fund at 100% all 8.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. And I wonder, well, as we've often said, that we're a partnering organization and that we should be challenging folks that if these things are so important, you're going to have to find some ways to sustain them, and wondering who your other partners are in doing this work, other funding partners. And so I sometimes cringe in giving folks 100% of what they want if they haven't also asked others in the community to support that work, and can show that there's this tie into the overall strategies of the community. It gets at some of what Commissioner Cooney said a little bit in regards to how does this all tie in. And so that's just one of my concerns. The other piece, trying to understand this second subtotal of $64,405. I'm assuming I see it sort of for support to these partners. Is this also for anything that comes up related to, let me back up. This $839,905, is that every dime that we have available?
Yes, currently.
So then if we have whatever needs regarding some great opportunity to get crops its head up that we really think we need to move forward, we have no resources to do that. Is that correct at this point?
Yeah, so I'll start with the 65. So that is another recommendation of the subcommittee. And that idea of customized grantee partner support is around the idea of supporting beyond the check. So what is in the original recommendation is direct service program delivery. We want to acknowledge that there may be other opportunities outside of that. We have stated that we want to move into the narrative work. That's stated in that as well. And then there was an appetite from subcommittee to look into urgent community response needs. So in terms of what you lifted up, any opportunities arising, it could possibly come from one of those three areas, but it's nothing directly explicitly saying, this is for opportunities that may arise. And then in terms of what you said for partnering and sustainability and basically, SPK being sole source funding, this was part of the process as well in terms of what other supports they had received. And so that was clearly stated in the LOIs, and all the organizations have received other type of supports.
Okay. Well, you've answered both my questions. I have a third. So I want to talk about the Ywca proposal, and I guess, is the deputy city manager on, or is it? Or
No,
is she not on this call?
Not yet.
So this is where I struggle. So there's certain things that the city is doing regarding poverty reduction or prosperity, whether it's lead pipe removals, whether it's all things possible, youth programs, things that we don't really are voice to, but we have supported. I'm wondering why, because the FFE supports the youth employment, the My City program during the summer, why they aren't providing the 110 to do the rest. If we're asking all of our partners that you need to have a 2-gen approach in what you're doing, how is the city's work that they're working on in regards to prosperity also utilizing that belief system? And it seems to me that this should have been an enhanced FFE ask in the city's budget to support the overall My City program. I mean, that, even though it's Ywca is bringing it forward, it's a city program. So it's really a city operation program that this agent is providing to the city. If this needs, and it does need to be a piece, I'm not pushing on that, but it seems like that should have been in the overall presentation to the commission regarding the budget needs to be increased by $110,000 rather than coming to asset, what we are, shared prosperity, excuse me, can't even say it today. This has happened a couple times now, whether it's the economic support for during COVID, whether it was a number or something else where, okay, we're going to get $250,000 and give it to United Way to do such and such work, where I go, well, why shouldn't that have been sort of part of the FFE when our efforts maybe are I see as trying to be more targeted on higher impact compared to, oh my God, there's an immediate need that businesses are struggling with dollars and we got to help them survive. And boom, we find $2 million in one case and $250,000 for families in another case. It just seems interesting to me that we go to FFE for one thing at the city and then we come over here for another. When KRESA is a huge partner on the My City program, that to me should have been integrated. But if they don't have a two-gen understanding or philosophy from a city staff perspective when it comes to the budgeting process, then we have an issue or challenge. I'm not sure I'm making any sense. It's just, this is what's going on in my head.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah, the FFE staff, Assistant City Manager Lamb, Deputy City Manager Lamb is not with us today at this time. And I don't know what contribution she could add to that, but yeah, I did talk to FFE staff. I didn't ask them that particular question, but I don't think it's, yeah, I don't think it's, you know, I think it's a good question. I don't have an answer for it, to be fully transparent.
All right, and I get it. So we have something before us. I get it. Carol, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is it more targeted in our neighborhoods? I mean, is that part of it where it would be more targeted on Northside, Eastside neighborhood?
Are you referring to the KRESA specifically?
Yeah, I just want, that's what I'm wondering, if that was one of the reasons.
No, the My City program already.
No, I know it exists. I was just wondering if this was to enhance our specific neighborhoods. And that's what I was asking. Not that I know that that's an overall city program, but if
what I was gonna say was the innovation, so to speak, is connecting to the parents of the participants in the youth program. The youth that they serve already, majority of them come from the SBK target neighborhoods anyway, so it wouldn't be outside of that.
Commissioner Cooney.
Well, it just seems to me, Bobby, that what you're talking about should be something we should be careful about in the future. But now we've gone through this process and here we are. I think we should approve these things. This is my opinion anyhow. But I think you raised an excellent point that we need to look at for the future.
So keep in mind, folks, this point I'm raising is, thank you, Doc. This point I'm raising is the same thing I raised when we did the bylaws, and I reminded city staff. Per our bylaws, we are to advise the city commission on shared prosperity within our community. So the work that they do, even the budget that they put forward, even though we are not allocating dollars for My City or for lead pipe removals, our voice should be in that. And if the city is just going off and doing because staff said or whatever and developing a budget, I'm not sure where that advisory voice comes in per the bylaws that they adopted. And I've raised this before, that our voice is the shared prosperity voice, at least per the appointment of the city commission. They can change that if they want, certainly. So I agree with Doc. We need to move forward and get some things moving. But I think this is a larger question. It goes back, I think, actually, Dr. Cooney, to your first question is, how are we integrating? How are we very strategic in what we're doing as we move things forward? You know, I agree with lead pipe removal. And I've said it before, but I've also said, is that the number one priority right now? Don't know. You know, we got a lot going on. And with this year of 2020 and a year of COVID, we've got more challenges in our community that we're facing. And so how do we course correct? How do we redirect that sort of thing? And those are the prosperity conversations that we need to have with city staff and budgeting process conversations as they're developing their interventions for prosperity, because it's our responsibility per them, well, per the commission. So anyway, Carol?
I just wanted, Kevin, can you acknowledge who was on the subcommittee, and also, you know, a big appreciation for the work of reviewing the applications, taking the time, and if anybody on the subcommittee might have any comments about the process, that would be great.
It was Shalana Lewis, Ben Davros, Akia Lee, Brenda Hughes, and Kim Hollers, and myself. And I think Shalana had her hand up. She did have her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I was just acknowledging that I was on the committee. Yeah, that's all.
Oh, okay.
I did want to just say, just as a committee member, kind of to Bobby Hopewell's point, is you know, when we were reviewing, we didn't have much discussion, and I didn't have much background on, just as a review member, on what FFE funds or what other city funding sources are covering what. So we just didn't have that information. And so I just wanted to just kind of lift that up. If there's some conversations that need to be had, I don't know, but you know, that didn't, at least for the part of the conversation I was in, that didn't come up as something that we needed to consider.
Yeah. I saw somebody raise their hand. Yeah, Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we did briefly talk about when we saw funding from THRT or what were we just talking about? The city funding. And Kevin did have conversations, and so we thought that the adult aspect made that different, but we would have been glad to have it funded otherwise and had more money to do other things with. But as far as the process, I just wanted to say briefly that we did eliminate like 7 off the bat for various reasons. And then the ones that were left, we only fully funded 4. And so this one, as well as 4 others, this is not the amount they asked for. I can't remember off the top of my head what they asked for, but this is not what they asked for. So it is less than the proposal was. So I just wanted to say that about the process.
This is Sakia. My apologies. I still have the meeting down as 12:30 on my schedule, but which proposal are we, as I catch up, are we talking about that was funded at less?
Oh, there's 4 of them, but we were talking about the K-RISA one just now.
Yeah. I just for context, just wanted to know. Okay, thank you, Brenda. And I will echo what Brenda said. We did eliminate some right out of the bat. We did try to keep that 2-generation focus at the center of the decisions that we made. We did talk about a little bit, very briefly, if FFE was funding any of the other projects when it came to the I want to say my city, but that isn't the correct terminology, but the youth focused ones. And then we also, it was hard because we were like, we know, as some of us are partners in the work with folks. And so we even tried to remove that lens to say, like, if we were not partners with these people, with these entities, will we still fund them? And so that we looked at it as both ways, as partners in the work. And then we took a pause and said, wait a minute, if we were not as close to these people would we fund things different? And that did shape some of the conversations. But, I reminded folks that we are on this committee because some of us are closer to the work than others. So, yep, just wanted to share that.
Mr. Pulley?
Hello, nice to be on the call with everyone. One question that I did have was about evaluation, and I think it gets to Commissioner Cooney's kind of context around how do we make sure that we're like not duplicating sort of services, and that we're really cutting across all of our targets across the city. And some of my experience comes in philanthropy, specifically around supporting grant recipients in their ability to share their story. And so by sharing their story, I think evaluation has a pretty big component to being able to not only give the numbers, but also tell the stories in a qualitative way that shows sort of the return of investment on the project, not only from a dollar standpoint, but just from accomplishing our targets that we set forth. And so I looked at the budget, and I just wanted to know, was there any consideration in not only sort of providing support for people, not just to get dollars, but how the dollars made X number impact?
So in terms of the duplication of services, that was a question that was on the application. Is this unique? Are others doing it in the community that you are aware of? If it is a type of duplication, like explain, how are you working to change that? So that was in the application phase, and that was stated clearly. In terms of providing support for the organizations, that was the second part of what the subcommittee discussed in terms of that piece, customized grantee support. And so it may be some opportunities to do that, to deepen relationships in order to be able to tell the stories a little better. We know just collecting data and putting data out there is not the most effective way to tell a story. So some of these organizations may require some more customization in how we go about doing that, right? In order to communicate impact. And so that amount of money outside of the direct service program supports is what that was intended to accomplish, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kevin, were all these folks aware that weren't funded, that we don't do capital type granting?
Yes. So in terms of communication, communications went out to everyone that submitted anything, whether moving forward or not. And for what was specific, it was highlighted in the communication. So for instance, yes, we're not in the business of doing hard cost capital type of projects. That was clearly stated in the communications that went out.
So in the application process to apply and everything, it was in that, or are you saying the communication after we determined that someone? The
communications after. The funding guidelines document stated what we were looking for, and it was to be transparent, that was not in the funding guidelines, that we don't support hard cost capital acquisitions. So that was not in the funding guidelines, but in terms of the LOI process and how we communicated to folks, we clearly stated it then.
Okay. We'll want to make sure it's in the funding guidelines too, though. If there's things that we don't fund, we should have that right up front and transparent about that. So someone knows, nope, I'm not going to spend my time in filling out anything because this is not within the realm. Because you could have a 2-gen program that is facilities or construction of this, that, or the other thing that may meet all the standards, unless we tell folks we aren't building stuff.
Right.
Are there any other questions? All right, so we have a motion to accept. We've got two that are going to be voted on separately. Is that right, Kevin?
Kalamazoo Literacy Council and the Ywca.
Okay, can you state, okay, so Kalamazoo Literacy Council and Ywca will be voted on separately. All the others are in this motion.
Yes.
Any other questions? May we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Don Cooney,
Yes.
Ben Dameron,
Yes.
Patrice Griffin,
Yes.
Kim Hollers,
Yes.
Brenda Hughes,
Yes.
Bobby Hopewell,
Yes.
Sakia Lee,
Yes.
Shalana Lewis,
Yes.
Carol McGlynn,
Yes.
Jonathan Pulley,
Yes.
Alyssa Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried unanimously. All right. Which one are we going to go with first, Kev?
The Kalamazoo Literacy Council.
All right. You've already presented all of these though, so there's no other presentation on them. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion to move the Kalamazoo Literacy proposal forward.
Moved.
Moved by McGlynn,
Support.
supported by Dameron. We are in discussion. Hearing no discussion, roll call, please.
Don Cooney,
Yes.
Ben Dameron,
Yes.
Patrice Griffin,
Yes.
Kim Hollers,
Oh, she can't.
Oh,
She can't vote.
she just say abstain, I think.
Yeah, you should state an abstention.
My intention would be yes.
but you have to,
No, actually,
Can
Kim,
I-
you have to say you abstain.
Oh, well, thank you, because I thought that's what we had already done. But no, I abstain, please.
Thank you.
Bobby Hopewell,
Yes.
Brenda Hughes,
Yes.
Sakia Lee,
Yes.
Shalana Lewis,
Yes.
Carol McGlynn,
yes.
Jonathan Pulley,
Yes.
and Alyssa Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you all. Motion carried. Next, Mr. Ford.
Is Ywca.
All right, we have the Kalamazoo RISA proposal. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So move, Brenda.
Moved by Hughes,
Second, by Lee.
supported by Lee. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Don Cooney,
Yes.
Ben Dameron,
Yes.
Patrice Griffin,
Yes.
Kim Hollers,
Yes.
Bobby Hopewell,
Yes.
Brenda Hughes,
Yes.
Sakia Lee,
Yes.
Shalana Lewis,
Yes.
Carol McGlynn,
Yes.
Jonathan Pulley,
Yes.
and Alyssa Stewart.
Abstain due to a conflict of interest.
Thank you all. Motion carried. Excellent. It's nice to be at this moment. All right, we are on item 6B, Alice presentation.
Before we move on, the second part of the material sent out in terms of the 65,000, I believe.
Oh, the other materials. All right, what are we calling that? Is there
I don't
support
think we,
programs? I mean, what is that? I mean, if somebody's making the motion, what are they motioning? What is it called?
Can we
I-
call it a contingency?
No, it's not a contingency.
We can't call it that?
I
I'm
don't
just
think
trying
that-
to find, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to find a word.
Okay. Hold on.
Could it just be called the responsive SBK, like responsive resources? They're just the remaining.
Urgent response or something like that.
So the only reason I'm asking is because it's titled three, it has three components. And
Right.
so, there's the urgent need, the media, and then grant support. So is this some type of administrative fund? I don't, we have to have something.
Okay.
Well, what is a
um,
word for a fund that has a few flexibilities? That might be. That's why I thought contingency might work if you needed a little more for this or you needed a little for that.
Okay, so let's do this. Since we don't have a title for it, where the motion would be to set aside $64,405 to support customized grantee partnership, whatever, media narrative work and responding to urgent community needs. So we'll just call it the 64,000 will be the line, I guess. So that would be the motion that I'm requesting.
So move.
Moved by Hughes.
What he said.
Is there support?
Supported by Lee.
Moved and supported. Discussion.
So just to be clear, that money, we're asking for that money from the city, and then once these all go to the city, then those funds would be available, or would we still
These
have?
are our funds already, right, Kevin? These are
yes, this is
came out
not,
of our,
yeah, we're not asking for city. This is all out of the total number that I've been providing you all in the updates. So
Right,
this is
but
out of
don't
that
we
total.
have to, doesn't all this go to the city at this point, or no?
No.
Okay, so this is we are just directing those funds then.
yeah, we're allocating those funds to those three items.
That's fine, got it.
Ms. Stewart, did you have something?
Thank you. Yeah. Did the subcommittee have any discussion about any parameters of caps for how much could be spent in any one of those three categories, or just any other kind of discussion about any limitations or boundaries? Or was the intent for it to be completely flexible and staff would bring recommendations on
So
expenditures out of that to this body?
so the conversation, the next step in this will be the subcommittee working on those type of issues and processes in terms of how folks can engage and get the support. So that will be the next step based on this decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Don Cooney,
Yes.
Ben Dameron,
Yes.
Patrice Griffin,
Yes.
Kim Hollers,
yes,
Bobby Hopewell,
Yes.
Brenda Hughes,
Yes.
Sakia Lee,
Yes.
Shalana Lewis,
Yes.
Carol McGlynn,
Yes,
Jonathan Pulley,
It's no longer on.
I think he
Okay.
disappeared.
Okay, Alyssa Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, committee members. Motion carried. Now are we on 6B, Mr. Coordinator?
Thanks, everyone. Can I just, I didn't have this on my calendar. I have another meeting at 1, so I'll have to jump off now, but thank you all.
We'll miss you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Yes, we are on 6B officially now. So this is Alice's presentation. Alice is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. This is work that's been largely spearheaded by United Ways, I think Michigan Association of United Ways, but we have Alyssa Stewart here from our local United Way to give us more information about the recent Alice report that was released, I think March 23rd. She has a brief presentation. Again, as a reminder, we have a hard stop at 1:30. So if we don't get through everything, we could definitely take this conversation until subsequent meetings. Wanted to put that out there. If we don't have anything else, I'd like to turn it over to Alyssa Stewart.
So before we do that, since we have a hard stop, are there any miscellaneous? I'm going to go to miscellaneous and unfinished business and just get them out of the way. Do we have any unfinished business?
No.
Do we have any miscellaneous?
No.
All right. And so that the public has an opportunity, but I'll ask before we adjourn, are there any public comments?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Ms. Stewart, the floor is yours.
Thank you all so much. If I could request screen sharing capability, that would be awesome. Thank you. So while that gets bestowed on me, I will just give a preface. Thank you. Kevin did a great job of teeing up ALICE, which, as he mentioned, is an acronym. This is actually our fourth full ALICE report. And as Kevin mentioned, this has been a statewide partnership and actually a national partnership. We're one of several states who is commissioning this ALICE report. And the research is driven out of Rutgers University in New Jersey, but we have an awesome Michigan-based research team, which includes partners from the Upjohn Institute as well. So we thank them for their partnership. So we have a brand new release, the 2021 ALICE report, which is what I will be touching on today. It is a big body of work, lots of awesome data, and lots of new enhancements this year, which we are really excited to talk about. But knowing we are constrained with time, I'm going to keep it pretty high level, and then I'll leave some time for question and answer. I also shared with this body some documents that can give additional context and information. And I will just say right now, in case there's anyone in the public listening, there's also an excellent tool, which can be found at www.unitedforalice.org/Michigan. It is an awesome interactive online data platform where you can find all of the data I'll talk about today, but much more. You can find all the national data. You can look at different counties. It's really awesome. And also add some new data elements, things like maps that show the coverage of internet service, where libraries are placed. So it layers all kinds of new data on top of this ALICE information, which is really exciting. So with that, I will share my screen. And I'm going to give some high level, and then we'll kind of dive right into some of the Kalamazoo County data and then the city of Kalamazoo data as well. So as Kevin mentioned, ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. And the report really seeks to paint a more robust and holistic picture of what households in our communities are really facing. We know that measures such as the federal poverty line are not adequate. They are not reflective of the real cost of living. They're extremely low, and they can be problematic if we just think about things in terms of below or above the federal poverty line. ALICE shows us that if we think of it that simply, we're really missing a huge part of the equation. The core of the ALICE report is that it actually uses localized cost of living information to create what's called an ALICE threshold. And the ALICE threshold is different based on each household's configuration. So I'm actually going to move around a little bit here. I hope you all forgive me. I'm going to actually go down to what's called the survival budget, because this is really the core of the ALICE report. So as I mentioned, localized data is used to create an actual monthly budget. And you can see the visual on the screen is this table, the survival budget. And you can see that it's just like maybe your own household budget, where there's housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare. Technology is a new one that was actually added recently in a recent report in acknowledgement of the fact that cell phone and internet are necessities. There's miscellaneous, which is just a small contingency. Taxes, you'll see the monthly total and annual total. And then importantly, the hourly wage. that it would take for the working adults in the household to meet this survival budget.
Wow.
Yeah, and so this, the hourly wage is essentially what then drives the idea of the ALICE threshold. So households in any of these given configurations that make below that hourly wage would be considered below the ALICE threshold. They'd be considered ALICE. Households who make more than that hourly wage would be considered above the ALICE threshold. And in some of the tables we're going to look at would be that above ALICE population. So I will pause here. Are there any questions about the budget that we're looking at? Okay. Again, you know, in talking to people and presenting this information, I get mixed feedback. Sometimes it's very much like, wow, these seem way lower than my expenses or way higher than my expenses. And so it is, you know, an average based on various data sources. One new thing that I do want to highlight is the last two columns on the right here. This is a new enhancement. We know that the senior population above 65 is a growing population in our country and here locally. And so they've actually isolated senior budgets in this iteration of the report, which is really helpful. So you'll see a single senior and two seniors. And the biggest difference is there are less transportation costs and higher healthcare costs. So trying to be sort of reflective of the unique dynamics for seniors. And I will note the hourly wage piece, that would be combined hourly wage. So for example, in the 2 adults, 2 in childcare column, that 35 would be the combined wages for the 2 adults. So that could be one individual making $20 an hour and one individual making $15 an hour. Could just meet that threshold. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move up and we're going to look at what the data actually showed us for this year's report. You will note that you'll see 2019 referenced throughout the report. That's because like many data reports, there's a lag in the data. So the 2021 report is showing us 2019 point in time data. The interesting thing about this report especially is it's basically giving us a snapshot of our community pre-COVID. And it really, we think, can help us understand some of the deep impact that COVID has had, because you'll see this data shows us how many families were really in very precarious situations even before the pandemic hit. So overall, the unit of measurement in the report is households. So you'll see the population reflected, the number of households in the county, median household income, which is $56,441, which is a couple $1,000s less than the state average. Our community's unemployment rate at the time of this publishing compared to the state average. And then ALICE households. So you'll see throughout the tables I'm about to show you, there's basically the portion of our community that is living below the poverty line. Then there is those living in ALICE, so above the poverty line, but below those ALICE threshold amounts that I showed you, and then those living above the ALICE threshold. So in poverty in Kalamazoo County, 15%, which is higher than the state average. And then ALICE households, 24%, which is slightly less. So if you kind of add the 15% and the 24%, that's a significant number, 39% of our community that is struggling to make ends meet, that is struggling to have their basic needs met. So here's some trend data. The great thing about this being you know, our 4th report is that you can start to see some trend lines being created here. So the blue line here is individuals in poverty below the poverty line. And then that lighter blue line above it is the ALICE numbers. So you can kind of see how poverty has trended over time and then how the ALICE population has fluctuated over time. you can see that the Alice numbers were trending up between 2016 and 2019. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we expect that upward trajectory will continue when we see that data in the next report. Interestingly, you will also see a growth in total households. Down at the bottom where there are those house icons, you can actually see in 2010, there were 99,256 households. In 2019, 103,196 households. Any questions about this chart? I know one question that I have when I look at this that I unfortunately don't have the answer to is, what happened in 2016, right? You can kind of see that both poverty and Alice declined, which is good. That meant more people were above the Alice threshold, so we're able to meet a survival budget. I'm curious, I mean, we have lots of people in this room. I'm curious if others have thoughts. I don't know if it was just that we had gotten a little bit further down the recovery from the 2009 sort of recession and we were sort of bouncing back from that. I'm not sure. Does anyone else have thoughts about that?
That's one of the things I see also, though, is that it's not just 2016. You start to see it trending down starting in 2012. So it's sort of, we've got an interesting block of time there where things were decreasing, though I do see the poverty line in 2014 didn't really take a downward view or whatever.
Yeah, and I will drill down into the data we have for the city too that can kind of show that trend over time too. So we'll get there in just a minute. So we already talked about the survival budget. I'm going to scroll past that. And then we're going to look at this county subdivision. So one of the other great things about the Alice report is that every year it comes out, it provides this table, which gives us a snapshot of different subdivisions of the county, the total households within those subdivisions, and then the percentage below the Alice threshold. So for simplicity purposes, this is just the below the Alice threshold, which would combine poverty and those who are Alice. So just to note that. And you can see that there's quite a span in the community for this 2019 data. So we have communities that are as low as 14%, Texas Township, Prairie Ron, some pretty low percentages there. And then all the way up with actually the city of Galesburg being the highest at 64% of households in that community would be below the Alice threshold. And then, next highest is the city of Kalamazoo at 53%. Many of the others, we find this to be very helpful because as we all at SBK know, there is often a narrative that cities have, that is where poverty or these issues are concentrated. And we know when we look at this data that Alice is everywhere. Alice lives in every part of our community, and that's important. What I personally love about the Alice report is that I think it can help prevent the sort of othering that can happen when we think about poverty, because it makes it clear that, at times, almost half of our community, and in community, there are some communities where almost half of the community is living in a situation that is preventing their stability, their financial stability, their freedom, their ability to make the choices that are best for their family. And so, and we depend on Alice. I think an important thing to know about Alice is that, and I'll go a little bit into demographics, but I'm not going to touch on the educational demographics, but that is on the expanded website. But there are Alice's with PhDs, there are Alice's with master's degrees and bachelor's degrees, working in specialized roles. It is, again, it's our neighbors, it's the people we depend on, people who care for our children, who care for our elders. And so I just think, again, it brings a level of life and humanity to the data that I know I personally really appreciate. Any questions about the county subdivision data?
Alyssa, I just want to point out that the difference when you look at the county and when you look at the city, right? So it's up 14% when you look at the city. If you went in the city and you looked at the neighborhoods, it would go up even higher, right? I mean, so I think it's important. These are overviews, and then when we constantly bring it down, right?
Absolutely. We know that the core neighborhoods, for example, Don, that are focused on by SBK, right? That those, as we dive in, would be even higher, right, than the overall city average. Absolutely. There are, more prosperous, where there's more wealth concentrated in other parts of the city. Absolutely. There is on the online website the ability to look by census tract and some other divisions. They were having some kinks with the process, but I'm hopeful that that will be working soon and we'll be able to dig a little bit deeper into those different parts of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I do want to look, because it is important to, whenever possible, disaggregate data by race. That is a critical piece of equity work. We cannot address what we do not know. There is this breakout for Kalamazoo County. So just to orient you a little bit to the chart, if you look to the very right, the black and white column, that just gives you an overview of the overall demographic makeup of the households that are talked about as we look at all of the county data. So you can see there, and it can be kind of hard to tell, sorry, with some of the coloration here, but the lower, I'll kind of go from the bottom up on that column, 2,118 are households identified as Asian. Black is the next category at 10,472. 84 identify as Hawaiian or sort of the Pacific Islander category. 3,448 identify as Hispanic. That large category is those that identify as white, 83,466 households. And that little top portion, 3,055, identifies as 2 or more races. Okay, so that kind of gives you just that snapshot. And then if you go over, you start to see how each of those different categories, the ones that are large enough to create a statistically sound analysis, so Asian, Black, Hispanic, white, and 2+ races, you can then see how they are represented as far as poverty, ALICE, or above ALICE. So starting with the Asian category, 446 of those households are in poverty, living below the poverty line. 383 would be within that ALICE category, so above the poverty line, but still below that survival budget number for their family configuration. And then 1,289 are above the ALICE threshold. So you can sort of see that coloration play out. Of note is the Black and Hispanic categories. So you can see for a Black household, more of them are living below the poverty line. More of them proportionately are living below the ALICE threshold. Similarly for the Hispanic population. And then you can see that the white population is kind of flipped, right? So there is much less poverty for white households. A good chunk in the ALICE threshold, and then many doing well, living above the ALICE threshold. And then 2+ races is similar to really sort of the kind of in between the Black and Hispanic rates. So what this would point to, as most of our community's data on really any indicator, it shows that there's a disproportionate outcome and a disproportionate economic situation for Black households and Hispanic households. So they are more likely to be living below the ALICE threshold. Any questions about this data besides, whenever I see data like this, my first question is why? Why does this happen, right? There are many reasons, the systemic inequities that impact access to resources, education, and also, the pay gap is a huge piece of this. We know that the data shows that BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, are much more likely to be paid less than their white counterparts. And that directly impacts where people fall in this data.
Alyssa, this is Sakia. So on the previous frame that we just looked at before, it broke things out by Galesburg or by city of Kalamazoo. Is this race broken out further, or are we only going to get to see the county information?
Yes, we only have this. I may be able to dig a little bit deeper and play around with the online website. We might be able to slice things a little bit differently, but that was all I could readily locate currently. I can do some digging on that though.
Okay.
With that, I did want to pull out, I did go back and dig through the past reports and just isolate sort of the information from those tables for the city of Kalamazoo so we could see a high level trend. Something that's relevant to this body. So you can see in the past reports, we had data from 2012, 2015, 2017, and then this report, you can see the number of households has grown steadily. And you can also see some of the fluctuation in the percentages below Alice. So we mentioned that in this report, it's reflected at 53%, but you can see in the past, it was as high as 59% in 2015. And that kind of speaks to, we talked about the county trends were trending downward. At that same time, the rates in the city of Kalamazoo were still much higher than the average. So interesting to see that kind of was almost inverse to the county trend, but has now been declining since 2015, which again, the lower the number, the better as far as. So those were the main data elements that I wanted to highlight for you all today. I did share in the packet and for the public, it's available either at the unitedforalice.org website or our local website, which is www.changethestory.org. There's a whole Alice landing page. We have these kind of county profiles. I also shared, we looked today at the survival budget. They actually also provide a thriving budget, a stability budget is what they call it, which I think is an element that we don't talk about as much, but I think is hugely important. The stability budget shows more what thriving would look like, what high quality childcare would look like, what high quality housing would look like. And it is significantly more. So it kind of shows the difference between survival, as I said, and thriving, and it is significantly more. And it starts to show that to reach a stability budget where families could actually begin to save, because that is something that I want to make sure we note on that household survival budget, there are no savings. And that is why it is called a survival budget. Fundamentally, families could be at that Alice threshold and not able to save anything, which makes them very financially vulnerable. And can create lots of issues. One health issue, one car breakdown, any of those things can tip the household into a real kind of financial tailspin, which can be very problematic. A few high-level trends that I would share from the overall report, which are that fundamentally, we've seen this for the last couple of years and it continued, the cost of living continues to increase. The real cost of living reflected in this budget is increasing at a rate of about 3.4%, while our official inflation measures are showing like 1.8% inflation. So the real cost of living is increasing more significantly than federal measures, and wages are stagnant. Another thing that I found really telling from this year's report is that in the state of Michigan, in 2019, there was a record high of hourly jobs. 58% of workers in Michigan were paid hourly. So salary jobs were the minority of jobs, which, many hourly jobs pay a good wage. I think of, jobs, skilled trades, manufacturing jobs pay a good wage. But the difficulty with hourly jobs is that they can be volatile. They can be more difficult to budget for, right? There can be overtime, and then there can be your line is closed down and you're not getting your hours this week, right? There's volatility, and there's generally the benefits are different, right? There's sick time, paid time off are accumulated differently often, and often benefits are paid differently. So it can create increased financial volatility for households. That also points a little bit to the gig economy that has been increasing. So jobs like Lyft, driving for Lyft or Uber, or being a Shipt shopper, or any of those things, which we know many of those jobs dried up or were significantly impacted, positively or negatively, by COVID. So again, just kind of painted the picture for the financial situation that we now find ourselves in, with so many families reeling from the impacts of COVID-19. So again, it tends to be that budget equation that we all grapple with, of money in, money out. And that's really why Alice is growing, is because the cost of living is increasing and wages are not keeping up with that. So I know I shared a lot of data, but any major questions or thoughts?
I have a thought,
Before
Alyssa.
you go, Brenda, can we stop the screen share unless you guys need it so that we can?
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Going back to the columns that you had for seniors, after being retired now for over a year, looking at that column, I see that if I hadn't worked for a job for 40 years that paid into the Michigan School Employees Retirement Fund, I would be way below. If I had to survive on Social Security, it would not pay that basic survival rate. So couple that with the trend in the kinds of jobs that we're having now that are not going to provide any retirement, and the aging population, it's just going to go up and up, because for anybody who is are going to have to survive on Social Security, let me tell you. So
yeah, I think they're huge. Brenda, thank you. I think that it kind of points to the policy implications. So I think about why we share, why is Alice important? I think one, I mentioned, I hope that even though it is data, that I've made it clear that these are humans, these are people, right? It's not just numbers. They're real people. They're us. They're our neighbors, and that is important on its own. But the policy implications and what we can do with this data is also really important. If we just talk about poverty, we would be thinking things are going great. The poverty rate's decreasing. Things are going well. Families are doing well, and we would be missing just such a huge part of the equation, right? That's fundamentally not the reality. We have people who are, which is amazing, moving out of poverty, but they're moving into the Alice population, which means that they still are insecure. And in many ways, many of our programs, our assistance programs, our supports that are offered in the nonprofit sector of them, many of them are targeting service towards families who are below the poverty line or pretty close to it. So often families get out of the poverty space and then their assistance drops away, right? They're not eligible for childcare supports anymore. They're not eligible for the food stamp support anymore. They're not eligible for scholarships for XYZ. And that actually can be an equally complex space to be in. And that is a critical piece of this. We need to make sure that our service delivery network is connected to the reality of what's happening. And that we are not, when we think about eligibility guidelines and eligibility criteria, that we're setting that appropriately so that we aren't creating a vacuum for these families where that assistance isn't available for them. So, United Way generates this report, but we're also a funder. So we think about that from our end too. And we've been trying to think about how do we ensure that philanthropic resources are supporting Alice families, but every entity has policies and practices that impact Alice's, whether it's their benefits, their time off, their absence policy, their eligibility criteria, all those things. We all engage with Alice, and we can all better support Alice.
I had a couple things. First of all, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this. And I read the other stuff that you sent us. It was very helpful. First of all, one of the things that comes to my mind is the importance of the federal programs, the child poverty allowance, which is going to probably reduce child poverty in the United States in half, but is only funded for a year. And the importance of advocating that that be a permanent program, I think is really important. And then the second thing I wanted to bring out was very clear from the data is the systemic racism that people of color are so much more. But the other thing is the systemic economic inequality, because the overwhelming number of people who are Alice are white people. So there's a new book out by Heather McGee talked about the sum of us, talking about coming together to change the systemic racism and the systemic inequality and how important it is. It's not a zero-sum game. And that's some of the fears about, wow, we're doing this for these people. No, we've got to come together.
Yes, absolutely. I actually have a visual, which I might pull up if I have time, but it actually shows the economic benefit that would happen in Michigan if every household was Alice. And it's something like $84 billion increase to our GDP in this state alone. If all families were Alice, paying into our tax base, purchasing, doing all the things that you do when you have income. And it's sort of mind blowing. So that's that idea, Don, of a rising tide raises all ships, right? We would all win if every household in our community was Alice. Also on the documents and on the website, it does break down different demographics too, Don, which I think is important. The intersectionality is important here. I showed the racial demographics, which are critical. They also have them by gender. They have them by household type. So you'll see that single female headed families are disproportionately in Alice. You'll see that households with seniors disproportionately, above average. And also young households. So households headed by individuals 25 and under are also disproportionately Alice. So you think about our recent college graduates coming out into the workforce, and they are also disproportionately. So it is interesting to see all of the demographic layers because you'll see that that white, that monolith identified as white, there's actually lots of layers there and people who are impacted differently.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I like lifting up the lots of layers. I think what would help me the most is just drilling that down to the body of work for the people in the population that we serve. I always go back to Kevin's presentation where it talks about the age in which people, I think like life expectancy broken down by zip code. For me, it always boils back down to zip code with this body of work and where we continue to see gaps and inequalities. And I still think that exists amongst race and gender and all of that. But I just wish we could see more of that. For me, it's a story that's told, but it's not complete. And so I just love to see more.
Absolutely. I'd love to circle back with you after and we can dig into that online platform to really kind of slice and dice the data in the way that works best for your respective organizations or bodies of work.
So I wanted to ask just real quick, I'm going back to Commissioner Cooney's statement earlier when we gave when we took action on the grants. It seems to me, Don, that this is, if you talk about how are we doing this strategically, then we should be using Alice to be the measure of our strategy. So
yes,
with our approach being our methodology to enhance prosperity is 2-gen approach. So that's our methodology of how we want to do it. Then the actions that we took or take with whomever that's going to be doing this work, we had them prove that they're going to be 2-gen. We need to have it so that you're going to be able to tell us how you will affect Alice. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, some of this is longitudinal work. I'm not saying that instantaneous, but what's your intentionality around that, and how can we, at the end of the day, find out how you did it at doing that? So I think that we need to interweave Alice maybe differently to help continue to answer that question of how are we moving strategically forward, especially down to, as Ms. Lee would say, the zip codes, but down to the individual. I go down to the family. So I think we'll need to address that with our grantees in some way, shape, or form. The other thing is, two other things. One is, I'm wondering what is being spent in this community. And I know feds and all that, but in our community, that is all this poverty work that's having an effect, because we spend a whole lot of money and our numbers aren't getting better. So something's amiss. Now, I'll say this, I don't necessarily think this, but is it that money's not going to do it? There's all kinds of pieces. And so we have to be about, as this body, figuring out more of those pieces of moving this work and having true impact. And also, I've been watching it, also being able to advocate for those things that are most important and push and be strategically aggressive at trying to drive prosperity everywhere within our community. So I think there's, Mr. That's where I took some of this, is that how we're going to use this to do the work.
Yeah, and I know we have like a minute left, so I'll be quick, but I think that you're absolutely right. I think what we have come to realize is that just wearing my United Way as the philanthropic entity, we put millions of dollars out, and we have for almost 100 years. We have been making philanthropic investments as one funder, right? And I know the community foundation, we have a huge philanthropy and nonprofit sector in this community. We cannot undo the impact or counteract the impact of the private sector and of the federal government and state government. Fundamentally, the resources that they manage are enormous compared to what we can do. So I know at United Way, we have doubled down, refocused ourselves. We're going to be partnering with the Community Foundation. I can share more about that in a future meeting, to think about the private sector and to really engage. They are a lever for change. The way that they support their workforce is the number one change maker. And federal and government resources, we're about to see a huge change in that. And so we will be excited to monitor how that impacts these families and what we see in our next iteration of the report, where we'll see the impact of the stimulus, the various stimuluses. So I think
it's
that
less than a
advocacy piece
minute left.
Yep. Thanks, Kevin. I'm done.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you all. And yeah, happy to talk in the future. We'll keep bringing this information back.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.